The broadcast of the Minneapolis Zoning Board of Adjustment on February 18th, 2021 may now begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this live broadcast of our virtual meeting today, February 18th, 2021. This meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota statutes section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. For the record, my name is Matt Perry and I'm chair of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I'll now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of quorum.
Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Iba. Chair Perry.
Present.
Sandberg.
Here.
Knopfler.
Aye.
Nikarova.
Aye.
Wang.
Aye.
That's 8 members present.
And so that means we have quorum. Thank you. With that, we'll proceed onto our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, available at lims.minneapolis.mn.gov. Is there a motion to approve this agenda?
So moved, Finlayson.
Second, Sandberg.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Chair Perry.
Aye.
Board Member Sandberg.
Aye.
Knopfler.
Aye.
Nikarova.
Aye.
Wang.
Aye.
That's 8 yeas.
And with that, the motion is approved, and we have an approved agenda. So let's move on to the minutes from the last meeting. I believe all the board members have seen a copy of the minutes from the February 4th, 2021 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Finlayson.
Second, Sandberg.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'm seeing none. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Chair Perry.
Aye.
Board Member Sandberg.
Aye.
Knopfler.
Aye.
Nikarova.
Aye.
Wang.
Aye.
That's 8 yeas.
And so that motion passes. The minutes from the Zoning Board of Adjustments February 4th, 2021 meeting are approved. Mr. Ellis, are there any petitions or communications?
Chair Perry, members of the board, there are no petitions or communications this evening. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So let's review the agenda. I'll read the agenda number and the address of the project and state whether it's slated for consent, continuance, withdrawal, return, or discussion. And I'll talk about what consent items are and what discussion items are. Consent items are those that will be passed without discussion by the board. We'll be adhering to the staff recommendation found on your agenda under the items recommended motion section. Importantly, any applicable conditions will be listed under the same section. If you agree with this recommendation, including any applicable conditions, you need to do nothing and the board will pass it as recommended. Please check in with the staff member assigned to that item if you have any questions following the decision. If you disagree with the recommendation, please indicate you'd like to speak against that item when I ask. and we'll put it on the discussion agenda. And what are discussion items? These are items which the board will take public testimony, deliberate on, and make a decision. After the public testimony has been heard for a particular discussion item, I will close the public hearing for that agenda item. Once I close the public hearing for an item, no additional public testimony will be taken from the public, but staff may be asked questions by board members. After the public hearing for an item is closed, board members will then discuss and act on motions. The chair only votes in the case of a tie. So with that, let's look at the recommended dispositions for items on the agenda for land use requests. Agenda item number 5 is 30 Park Lane. This is a discussion item. Agenda item number 6 is 3037 DuPont Avenue South. This is also a discussion item. Agenda item number 7 is 5345 Pleasant Avenue. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anyone to speak against this item? I'm hearing no one. And agenda number 8 is 1324 Quincy Street Northeast. This is a discussion item. So let's review the items on the agenda for consent. They are item number 7. Is there a motion to adopt this item on consent?
So moved, Finlayson.
Second, Sandberg.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I see none. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Sandberg.
Aye.
Softly.
Aye.
Smikarova.
Aye.
Wayne.
Aye.
That's 7 yeas.
That motion passes. So if you were here for agenda item number 7, your land use request is approved. Good luck with your project. Let's move on to agenda item number 5, which is 30 Park Lane. 30 Park Lane. And we have Mr. Kohlhaas to present.
Thank you, Chair Perry and members of the board. Could IT staff pull up a copy of the slides that staff had submitted for this item? This is a request for variances for construction of a new single-family dwelling with an attached garage at 30 Park Lane. The subject property is located in the R1 multiple family district and the Shoreline overlay district. This item was originally on the agenda for the February 2nd, 2021 hearing of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, but it was continued to tonight's hearing following some recent plan revisions by the applicant. And my preservation tonight should reflect those revisions from the original proposal. Next slide, please. This property has a lot area of 19,671 square feet and a lot width of approximately 83 feet measured along the required front yard. For zoning purposes, the front of the property is to the east along Park Lane and the rear of the property is to the west. Immediately west of the subject property, there is a separate parcel measuring approximately 40 feet wide which is owned by the Minneapolis Park. Park Board. The applicants for this variance are not proposing any changes on this park board land, but it is immediately adjacent. West of that park board property is Cedar Lake itself. This is then a survey of the existing conditions of the property. You can see there is an existing one-story single-family dwelling with an attached front-facing garage extending in front of the rest of the house, so to the northeast. Though the main front pedestrian entrance to the house is farther back on the structure, still facing the east, and there is a walkout basement facing the rear. There are 2 existing front driveways and curb cuts leading to Park Lane, plus some additional paved turnaround space on the south sides of the driveway, with both of these driveways leading to that attached front-facing garage in the house. There are other existing landscaping improvements on the property, including patios, decks, retaining walls in the front and rear yards. I'll also note that there are some steep slopes on and near the property. A steep slope is defined in the zoning code as land having an average slope of at least 18% over a minimum rise of 10 feet and a minimum run of 50 feet. The steep slopes in this case are located northwest and southwest of the existing house on the subject property, as well as another steep slope that essentially runs through the center of the existing house, just based on the way that we have to calculate those slopes with the difference between the average of the existing elevation points. Next slide, please. These are some photos of the existing property submitted by the applicants. These are taken from in the front yard looking west towards that existing house. So on the right-hand side, you can see that attached front-facing garage, and to the left is kind of behind that tree in the foreground, but in the background on the left is that existing pedestrian entrance for the house. Next slide, please. This is another photo taken from approximately the same area, but this time looking to the east towards Park Lane. So in the foreground, you can see those the 2 existing driveways leading to the curb cuts along Park Lane. They have this landscaped, vegetated island in between the 2 driveways, but both of these lead to that attached front-facing garage. Next slide. Another photo this time taken from the backyard looking towards the back of the house. So on the bottom, you can see that walkout basement, and above it is the rest of the house and a deck, some other landscaping improvements and vegetation, etc. Next slide, please. This is the proposed site plan submitted by the applicants, and their proposal again is to demolish that existing single-family dwelling and construct a new 2-story single-family dwelling. So the design of their proposed house would be similar in a lot of aspects to the old house. It would still have that similar kind of L-shaped design with the attached front-facing garage to the northeast and the main pedestrian entrance further back on the structure. It would still have a walkout rear basement, still have a rear deck, this time in the southwest corner as opposed to closer to the northwest, and other landscaping improvements like patios, retaining walls, landscape walls. The new house would have I believe it's a larger floor area than the one that is there now, and a slightly different location, slightly different orientation on the property, but would match the existing in a lot of regards. Regarding the driveway, their proposal is to eliminate that the existing north driveway and curb cut, and also eliminate the existing turnaround paved area on the south side of the driveways, and make some other modifications, but otherwise leave much of that existing south driveway that would be used to access the new attached front-facing garage. And they're also proposing to leave a portion of that existing north driveway. You can see it kind of sticks out to the northeast of the rest of the driveway, which would serve as kind of a turnaround or some maneuvering area on the property. So based on how we have to measure the width of the driveway, which is perpendicular to the primary direction of vehicle traffic, this kind of bump out for the turnaround space results in a proposed driveway width of 35 feet 8 inches, as shown on their plans here. Next slide, please. These are some elevation drawings in this case, both showing different perspectives on that front elevation. So on the top, this is kind of the true perspective of if you're standing looking in, or if you're standing in the driveway looking at the house. On the right-hand side, you can see the garage door for that attached front-facing garage. Further left in the foreground, there is what I think is labeled on the plans as a covered entry structure. This is a detached accessory structure that they are proposing. My understanding is the intent is sort of an architectural feature that would guide the pedestrian activity towards the main pedestrian entrance further back on the property. This elevation drawing in the bottom is still showing the front of the house, but focusing on those aspects, the main bulk of the house, which is actually further back on the property. Next slide, please. Here's some additional elevation drawings. On the top is the proposed west elevation, so facing the rear. You can see that walkout basement on the level, or that walkout basement on the bottom level. This basement is very exposed on the west elevation, but is sufficiently buried on the other sides of the house that it does not constitute a story on its own. So just to be clear, the proposed structure does meet the zoning code definition of a two-story structure, even though the basement is very exposed on the rear. The bottom drawing here is the north elevation drawing. Next slide, please. So there are 3 variances which are required for this project, which the applicants are requesting. First is a required variance for development on a steep slope or within 40 feet of the top of a steep slope in the Shoreline Overlay District. And then there are 2 separate variances which are required, both related to the width of the driveway, which again measures 35 feet 8 inches as proposed at its greatest extent. So 1 variance is required just for construction of a driveway which exceeds the maximum width of 25 feet in a residential zoning district. And then another separate variance request is required for a driveway exceeding the maximum width of 12 feet for a driveway extending along the length of the required front yard. And in this case, the length meaning the dimension parallel to the front lot line. So this last bit, this is a specific provision of Chapter 537 of the Zoning Code, which regulates accessory uses and structures. And it specifically lists some stricter requirements for a driveway for which any portion of the driveway would extend more or less parallel to the front lot line. And in this case, the driveway sort of has that jog over to line up with the location of the garage. And so the stricter maximum driveway width of 12 feet applies for any portion of a driveway which would be within the required front yard. And so again, the applicants are requesting these 2 variances related to the driveway in addition to the steep slope variance. So even though the existing driveways are non-conforming in several regards, including just the fact that there are these 2 existing front driveways, the applicants are proposing to demolish that existing dwelling and replace it with this new house, which means they would lose any non-conforming rights for the property, including for aspects like the driveways, which are not directly related to the house. Residential properties without alley access, like this one, are permitted to have 1 front driveway and curb cut, but having 2 front driveways and curb cuts like the existing property has is no longer permitted on a residential property like this. This is why the applicants are required to eliminate one of the existing driveways and curb cuts to bring the property into compliance with this maximum of 1 driveway and curb cut, even though their specific proposed driveway design would still require these 2 variances relating to the different maximum driveway width requirements of the code. Next slide, please. And we can actually stay here for the rest of my presentation on this slide. To transition to talking about the findings, and for the first required variance regarding development on a steep slope in the Shoreline Overlay District, staff finds that the 3 standard required findings are met for this request, and there are some additional findings which are specific to the Shoreline Overlay District, which apply to all variance requests as part of this application. And staff finds that these shoreline specific findings are met for all variance requests. I'm happy to speak regarding these findings in more detail if necessary, especially if there are any questions of staff regarding these topics, but in the interest of time, I'll focus on the other variance requests and findings which staff does not find are met. So for the 2 variances related to the driveway width, staff findings for these are substantially identical to each other, so I'll talk about both of these at the same time as well. For the first finding regarding practical difficulties, staff do not find that practical difficulties exist because of circumstances unique to the property, which support either of the proposed variances regarding the maximum driveway width. The subject property is relatively large and relatively wide compared to most residential properties in Minneapolis, and this portion of the property where the driveway is located between the house and the street is also relatively flat. There is some existing vegetation in between the house and the street, but the applicants could still reduce the width of the driveway to meet these requirements without encroaching on existing landscape areas, or compromising their ability to access the proposed garage. For the second required finding regarding reasonable use in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance and the comprehensive plan, staff does not find that this is met either. The spirit and intent of these ordinances regarding a maximum driveway width are generally to minimize the extent of paved areas, especially on residential properties, paved areas which can have impacts on things like stormwater runoff and contribute to heat island effects. The spirit and intent of the stricter requirements, specifically regarding driveways extending across the required front yard, is to encourage driveway designs which provide the most direct access from the street to the garage, and to provide additional scrutiny in front yards, which are often the most visible portion of the property from the street. The intent is really to limit the visual impacts of auto-oriented aspects of the property, so that these auto-oriented aspects are not the dominating features on the property, but so that the driveway remains, clearly accessory to the principal use of the property in this regard. The excessive driveway width in this case is primarily due to that maneuvering or turnaround area that the applicants are proposing in front of the garage. To provide just a little bit of context on some other areas of the code, the zoning code strictly prohibits any vehicle maneuvering in the public right-of-way, including backing a vehicle onto a street. This is prohibited for non-residential uses or for more dense residential uses with 5 units or more, with the understanding that these more intense uses are more likely to generate just more traffic in terms of the number of vehicles, and also potentially larger vehicles, which may have more difficulty with maneuvering. So we require all that maneuvering to be done on site. For residential properties with 1 to 4 units, however, vehicle maneuvering in the public right-of-way is permitted because it is found to be less likely to result in issues like this. So considering the fact that the ordinance specifically allows off-site maneuvering associated with single-family dwellings, staff does not find that the proposed variances to exceed the maximum width of the driveway for provision of this turnaround space is in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance to limit impervious surfaces for driveways and in front yard areas. For the third finding regarding essential character of the locality and potential for injury or detriment to other persons or property, staff does not find that the proposed driveway variances would alter the essential character of the locality, which includes a number of front-facing garages and front driveways. The proposal, the revised design for the driveway does constitute an overall reduction in driveway area compared to the 2 existing driveways on the property. Much of the existing driveway would be in compliance with the maximum driveway widths. It's really just this proposed maneuvering area in front of the garage door that exceeds that maximum width. And finally, the driveway in this case is already sufficiently separated from neighboring properties and is surrounded in many areas by existing vegetation, which provides some screening from the neighboring properties as well. So in conclusion, staff recommendation is for approval of the applicant's requested variance for development on a steep slope in the Shoreline Overlay District, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. However, staff recommendation is for denial of the applicant's other requested variances to exceed the maximum width of a driveway in a residential zoning district, as well as to exceed the maximum width of a driveway extending along the length of the required front yard. There are some additional application materials submitted by the applicants, which should have been included in the packets, and I believe the applicant's representatives are in attendance during this hearing as well. There were a number of written public comments which were received prior to the publication of the staff report, so those should be available as well. This concludes my presentation, but I am available for questions if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Kohlhaas, for your presentation. Are there any questions of staff? Mr. Softly.
Thank you, Chair Perry, and thank you, Mr. Kohlhaas. I wanted to ask a question with regard to the arguments you made related to the size of the lot. You had mentioned that the size gives the applicant plenty of space to design a driveway that would be in compliance with the code, but I look at the size of the lot and I see a space that is, first of all, quite unique in its size, being 3 times larger, but requires some maneuvering on a long driveway to get from the street fully, across what about a third of a fairly deep lot into the driveway. And to me, that seems to be a factor that is unique that would require a turnaround space. Can you just reiterate why the size of the lot is actually, in your view, a detriment to granting the variance?
Chair Perry, Board Member Softly, the size of the lot and the width of the lot specifically are found just to give the applicants more room for design of a driveway in this case, so that they are not necessarily limited by a smaller space where they have to put a driveway in a specific location. They are using much of that existing south driveway for their proposed driveway that they're using, so they are responding to existing conditions in that regard. But it's just the fact that the property is of such a size that they just have more room to work with. So where if they did want to have a narrower driveway that went somewhere else on the property and provided a more direct access, they have the opportunity to do so because the site is so large.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Claus.
Are there any other questions of staff? I see none. So I will open up the public hearing. We have people in queue to speak, Keith and Barbara Lurie. If you could go one at a time, because we're recording this, I'm getting the word that they may not be online anymore. So is Dan Knepp available?
I am.
Do you want to give testimony?
Yes, I would, please.
If you could give your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Dan Knepp, and our office of TEA2 Architects is at 2724 West 43rd Street in Minneapolis.
Please proceed.
Okay, as I said, I'm Dan Knepp, and I'm a principal at TEA2. Thank you, Chair Perry and board members, for your time and attention to our application. And thank you, Alex, for your time and review of the project. We were hired by Keith and Barbara to not only create a beautiful home for them, hopefully, but also because we have worked in Minneapolis for decades, creating additions and new residences that are known to be sensitive to the surrounding contacts, that create good neighbors, and that we think are appropriate and fit into the neighborhoods. So we do not seek variances lightly, and believe today our requests are appropriate for this neighborhood. I'm going to speak about the variances 3 and 4 for the driveway here. If someone can put up, since I can't see it in real time, the PDF attachment that we sent today with image number 1, I'll request that as we go through 11 different images. Regarding the variance 3.1 and 4.1 practical difficulty, the staff reports that the staff did not find there are practical difficulties. We do believe there are. There are 2 primary ones. First is preserving the existing grove of mature trees. There's a 15-inch white pine and a 12-inch white pine and a 15-inch ginkgo tree, plus other mature landscaping. And we see this as a valuable resource to the neighborhood. There's been more than one neighbor who has stated that they are appreciative of saving the ginkgo tree and the other landscape that's there. The other one is safety, and that the maneuvering that we need is relative to safety. Could you go to image 2 of the site plan, please?
Mr. Knapp, apparently
yes.
There's the IT people have got a, oh, okay, they've got an image up. I just wanted to make sure your images were being presented. So if you could just give us a moment.
Sure, just tell me when you're ready.
Yep,
Yes.
will do. So you wanted to be on, what image did you?
The image 2 site plan.
The site plan.
Yes, yes, please.
You had it.
Okay,
Okay for me to proceed?
yep.
This is the floor plan still.
Okay.
Oh, this is the floor plan. I'm sorry.
Keep going back.
Are you in the attachment that we have from today?
There you go. That's the site plan.
We have the site plan up and running right now.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So please proceed.
So, thank you. Again, as I mentioned, this is the need to maneuver is relative to safety. Even though the zoning code prescribes to back straight out, which fits for a conventional Minneapolis lot and conventional neighborhood and street width, we have none of those here. The proposed south driveway is safer entry point than the suggested alternate by staff of the north entry, which is aligned at the T intersection, creating another angle from on-street traffic. And very importantly, the park lane itself is atypically narrow for a Minneapolis residential roadway, which means backing out would have to occur over both lanes of traffic. There's no parking lane buffer space for backing into or for improving visibility. The lane, as I will call it, versus a street is narrow, and we're backing into a street at our location that is from 19.9 feet and varying up to 21 feet. Based on Minneapolis guidelines for streets and sidewalks, published on the current Minneapolis Public Works website, the smallest minimum roadway width is 22 feet, plus 2-foot curbs each side and 17-foot pedestrian zones. A street with one parking lane would be 30 feet plus 2-foot curbs, etc. So we are narrower in the road itself and in the areas on the side. Could you go to image 3 from our PDF that we sent today, which has the Google Street View up and down the street?
I don't know if we have that that IT got your packet.
Oh, I see. Yep. So that will not, you will not have it in the original packet. You will not have a street view up and down. That's okay.
No, we have what the staff report had, as well as, oh, maybe we do have that. So we have something that says, okay, so IT has found it, which is good for,
Okay.
for everyone.
Yeah, it makes it easier and smoother.
Yep, so we have something that says view looking north and view looking south.
Yes, image 3, yes.
Okay, we are looking at that now.
Okay, thank you, great. In addition to the roadway being below guideline minimum, there are no sidewalks in Boulevard, which helps with providing line of sight. Additionally, on the applicant side, there's existing topography, a little bit of roll down, plus the vegetation, which makes it also more difficult for line of sight. So if the car is to be backed into the traffic there is no parking lane buffer, visibility is less, and so we do think turning around is a much safer piece. And that's really all we're asking for here. There's not full-fledged off-street parking, but just enough room, and we tried to tailor it as tight as we can to be able to back up and tee and turn around from the garage. Image 4, please, which would be the diagram of the neighborhood.
Yes.
Thank you. So there's also a clear pattern of non-conforming driveways in the neighborhood, and especially on these, what we're calling lake lots. 50% of the driveways are non-conforming on the lake lots, so if you can look at that diagram. So we're not asking to be different than our neighbors. In fact, we're asking to be similar to what is half of them already have there. Additionally, as mentioned by Alex here, the existing house and lot did have 2 non-conforming elements of the second curb cut and driveway and the 2-car parking area in the front yard setback. in this new design, although it is a fully new house, we are removing those. So I don't think we're setting precedent here with what we're doing. Could we go to image 5, please? Proposed design and entry. Staff report suggests that coming in the north entry would eliminate the wider drive that is being applied for. In regard to that, the north versus south entrance, the suggestion is that we came in from the north, which is a few degrees straighter than the southern entrance, and a little bit less wind around the tree grove. We would not need the turnaround. We disagree with that. We have basically the same issue, and we would still be applying, if we use the north one, for this variance to get the turnaround piece. Additionally, if we had the north side, we would not be able to surveil the north side at all from the house. We would be screened by the garage. So the proposal to go from the north would not meet the standard or the goals, the principles of the crime prevention through environmental design of having natural surveillance of the drive. The southern entrance allows us over 50 feet of the front facade and windows to surveil the entry. We're also allowed to look down the driveway at the entrance of the driveway and onto Park Lane. The north entrance would be completely blind to the house. Could we go to image 6, please? Back to the site plan that's zoomed in a little bit. Regarding variance 3.2 and 4.2, in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance and comprehensive plan, staff states that the specific intent of the maximum widths is to reduce impervious surfaces. The proposed design that we have actually reduces impervious surface from the code prescribed solution of a 25-foot wide straight out version and the existing drive. You can see the numbers we listed in the submission that we did today, but the new design in total for the property is 1,481 square feet less. The driveway itself is reduced by 660 square feet, and then within the front yard setback is reduced 839 square feet. A straight-in driveway to the garage has more impervious surface at 1,653, and we would require cutting down the trees compared to what we have, which is the 1,578 for that. So the south driveway, because of the unconventional lot depth, the unique neighborhood and patterns of garage and driveway have afforded us a different approach that we believe diminishes the garage more than the prescribed code approach of going straight in and meets the spirit and intent of the ordinance and the comprehensive plan. The proposed design creates an opening in the landscape facing the street that focuses on the house, on the entry pavilion and garden, and not the garage. This is a more pedestrian-oriented and pedestrian-friendly approach from the street. The driveway then slightly bends around the evergreens towards the garage, which further diminishes the appearance of the garage. This allows hiding of the garage door behind the planting and the trees and a mature grove that's there. And then the garage door itself and the front face are further diminished from the street by being deeply recessed under a 10.5-foot eave with supporting and screening architectural half-height walls and columns on the sides. Additionally, the new garage in relationship to the old is 10 feet further back on average for a total of 80 feet back, which is, I think, on average, a fair ways back for homes in Minneapolis. So we think this design very much fits the context of the existing lake lots that are in this neighborhood. Can we go to image 7, please? Which is a view of the existing north entrance and garage. The north drive suggested entrance does not meet the spirit and intent nearly as well. As you can see, the drive to the north side directs one only to the garage, which we see meets less the spirit and intent of the ordinance and the comprehensive plan. This clearly increases the dominance of the garage in the street and pedestrian experience Driving up to the garage would be the first and only thing one would see, and none of the house. One would have to leave their car and walk around in order to see the facade of the home. And again, this would be a possible area to surveil coming in from that side. Can we go to image 8, please? Proposed design and entry. Staff states that even though the code permits off-site maneuvering vehicles, our proposal does not meet the spirit and intent. We respectfully disagree with that. The proposed design does a better job to minimize the extent of driveway and impervious surface. As stated previously, the design is actually less impervious surface than the 25-foot wide straight-in driveway. In addition, the visual impact of the impervious driveway from the street is actually much less, with the proposed design of being a narrower curb cut and narrow drive up and around than the straight-in drive. There's only a short distance of the drive, which is actually wider than the maximum 25 feet. And that area is hidden by the plantings and the tree growth. So we do believe that the proposed design meets the spirit and intent of the ordinance better than the prescribed solution in the code. Can we go to image 9, please? Analysis of neighborhood driveway context. The neighborhood character and pattern supports this proposed driveway in our belief. This is a really unique, small, isolated neighborhood of less than 2 blocks. Its character is primarily determined by the rare existence of the Minneapolis homes backing up to a lake. This creates a really rare stretch of what we think of lake lots and not city lots. There's no alleys on these lots either. So this factor of no alleys and the focus on the lake creates a certain type of typology of garages, which are typically flush or forward of the homes and not set back. And this pattern is a key indication of how unique these garages and driveway layouts are and how unique this neighborhood is. These factors result in 75% of the homes on the lakeside to have same or similar garage positions that face further forward than 5 feet or extend with a side entry very far in front of the home, including one that is into the front yard setback. And even more specifically regarding the unique pattern for this 2-block stretch, half of the driveways themselves are non-conforming in one or more different ways. Driveway widths are more than 25 feet, property has 2 or more curb cuts, parking area between street and house, driveways come in at different angles. So there's plenty of variety of non-conforming driveways in the neighborhood. Our proposed design is not a one-off driveway within the neighborhood context. The minimum turnaround spot would be well screened from the street and would not appear as a significant additional parking or work as additional parking without blocking garage access. Can we go to image 10, please, site plan? So for a variance piece 3.3 and 4.3, not alter the essential character or be detrimental to the health or safety and welfare. Staff report states that the majority of the drive is in compliance, including the area closest to the street. You can see this on the site plan as the driveway maintains the 12-foot width for a considerable majority of the path through the front yard. We see this staff report is generally supportive other than the minimal area for maneuverability. This is a key indicator to us that our driveway is of the character of this unique neighborhood. And in fact, from our analysis, the neighborhood would be more consistent and attractive enhancement rather than a detriment. Image 11, please. This is an image of the proposed drive entry and house. So in summary, the site does have practical difficulties with the tree grove and with safety with the roadway below guidelines and with poor sight lines. The drive meets the spirit and intent by removing non-conforming elements, reduces the impervious from the prescribed approach, and reduces the visual amount of driveway from the street. It also provides better surveillance and conceals the garage more than either the straight-in code prescription or the suggested code allowed alternate northern route. The only thing it does not do is meet the technical prescription of width at the widest area. The variance request all comes down to the small area used to turn around for safety on a uniquely deep lot in a very unique neighborhood. And this design is very consistent with this neighborhood, which is reinforced with all the strong recommendations from multiple neighbors that have submitted. The variance requests show how our approach to the drive is better for the neighborhood than the prescribed approach or the suggested alternate north approach, which would both lessen the experience for the neighborhood. To us, it meets the spirit and intent better. Thank you.
Thanks for that detailed testimony. Mr. Knapp, I have a question. What is in the proposed driveway, you have this backup area so that people, the homeowners can drive back up and drive out onto Park Lane. If they didn't and they had to back up, what is the distance? The lot is large, but from the drawing that you last left, I can see the garage, and it doesn't look like it is that long a distance.
It's, I believe, around 80 feet. There's also another person from our firm, Aaron Frazier, who I think is set up to speak as well. He can have more facts on that. If he can star 6 and unmute himself, he might be able to answer that more accurately.
Okay. Before we do that, does anybody else have any questions of Mr. Knapp? I'm seeing none. So, Mr. Frazier, if you could star 6 and unmute yourself, if maybe you could address my question and give any additional testimony. You certainly don't need to repeat anything that Mr. Knapp has said.
Hi, yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Hello. Hi, this is Aaron Frazier.
Yes.
Hi, okay, you can hear me. Yes, I'm from Dan's response about the depth from the street to the drive. It is in a direct dimension of 80 feet, so meandering with a turn to the south driveway, it's probably closer to 95 in total drive length, 90 or so.
Okay.
And
did you have additional testimony you wanted to give?
I do not.
Okay.
This is Keith Lurie. I would like to give some testimony if possible.
Yeah, I was just going to call on you.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you. I had a little problem getting in, and as you know, there's a delay factor, which makes it a little more complicated, but thank you, and thank you all for helping us resolve this issue. When we first found this house on this street, we were thrilled. The neighborhood is very special, and the house is not too big, not too small, and we endeavored with Dan Knapp and Aaron to keep a very similar footprint. And then we discovered that we could not even apply for a variance for a double curb cut because those are not allowed anymore. And so that presented the challenge that we're dealing with today. We would love to have a double curb cut. It makes the most sense aesthetically. It makes the most sense from what is there today. And then we certainly don't want to cut down the trees. But we need to have a way to safely pull out of our driveway. And that's the essence. And I'm very concerned that if we have to back out onto a narrow street, especially where there's a hill, that is dangerous. It's dangerous for us, dangerous for our neighbors. And we won't be able to survey the street from a crime perspective. So I would strongly encourage you to take those factors into consideration. First and foremost, the safety of the drivers, and then the security of the neighborhood, and then the fact that we're really trying to preserve the feel of the place. Minimal changes. And then finally, this is a really beautiful block, a beautiful neighborhood. And frankly, one size shouldn't fit all when it comes to these rules. That's why we have this variance process. So we respectfully disagree with the analysis you heard and urge you to consider what Dan Knapp has proposed. And thank you.
Thanks for your testimony. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? If you'd star 6 and unmute yourself. Okay, Let's close the public hearing. Board comment. Anyone? Mr. Johannesson?
Thanks, Chair Perry. I look at this and I feel like there's a lot of odd ordinances that prevent this from being the quality product it should be. I agree with testimony that backing into this road is dangerous. It's a tight road. There's a lot of trees. I feel like it could have a much wider driveway that runs perpendicular into the garage door, which then everyone just gets to see your garage door, which is kind of counter the 2040 plan in my opinion. You know, seeing the house first and then the garage and not seeing a bunch of cars in the driveway and stuff. I feel like this is kind of nitpicky. This site is very unique and I don't feel this is out of bounds. I would, right now I'm leaning towards supporting the applicants in this, but I'd love to hear what the other board members might have to say.
Okay, thanks for those comments. Mr. Hutchins?
Thank you, Chair Perry. I want to also agree with Mr. Johannesson and all the testimonies of the applicants given. It's a very unique lot. It is a safety issue with how narrow the road is. I think that adds a practical difficulty on itself. If they were to back in, I mean, what's the average length of a car? 18, 19 feet at least. You're blocking the entire roadway because of how narrow it is just to turn around. That alone to me is a practical difficulty. So I'm willing to hear somebody else's opinion.
Thanks for those comments. Anyone else? Anyone else like to comment? Mr. Hutchins, you would like to make a motion?
Would staff be, thank you, Chair Perry. Would staff be comfortable with the applicant's findings for the two variances they're looking to deny, or would we have to come up with better language? Staff is fine, Mr. Coas says. Okay, so yeah, I'd like to move forward with granting the three variances requested, counter to staff's findings, using the findings that the applicant has given for his numbers 2 and 3, I believe.
Okay, and Mr. Johannesson is saying that he is seconding the motion.
That's correct. I second that.
So there is a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chair Perry, may I ask for clarification? Is the motion also including approval of variance A?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. With that in mind, Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sandberg, that was an aye?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Softly.
Aye.
Nikarova.
Aye.
Bang.
No.
So that's 6 yeas and 1 nay.
That motion passes, so the requests are approved. Good luck with your project. To the lorries. And now we'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is 3037 DuPont Avenue South. Mr. Liska.
Thank you, Board. Chair, good evening. If IT could bring up the presentation for me, please. The variance request is located at 3037 DuPont Avenue. There is a patio, gazebo, and a hot tub proposed as a part of this. This site is a single-family dwelling with a detached garage. The site is flat and there are no trees. It's zoned R2B and it's just under 6,000 square feet. On the north, the top of the map below, we see the hatched area. That's the pedestrian-oriented overlay district associated with Lake Street. Along Lake Street and DuPont, there are some commercial uses here. As you move south down DuPont, it's a mix of residential uses. Ranges from single families like this proposed project to, I believe, a 17 dwelling unit apartment there on the corner of 31st and DuPont. Next slide, please. The applicant constructed a patio, gazebo, and hot tub in the 5-foot required interior side yard setback. The patio and hot tub are at 3.2 feet from the lot line, and the gazebo is at 3.6 feet. The applicant is seeking to reduce that interior side yard setback to allow for those three components to remain as constructed. Next slide, please. When we're looking at a variance, 3 findings must be met. First one involves practical difficulties. Staff finds that there are no practical difficulties in complying with the ordinance. This lot is of standard size. It has no unique features that would make complying with this ordinance challenging. The second variance finding regards the use of the property. Is it done so in a reasonable manner? The proposed variance, staff finds, is not a reasonable use of the property. The intent of code is to provide a separation between uses. The 6-foot privacy fence that exists between the patio, gazebo, and hot tub and along the adjacent neighbor does shield some of that, but code instructs that that 5-foot setback is met for aspects like patios, gazebos, hot tubs, other accessory uses like that in this location. The last variance finding is regarding the essential character of the area. Staff finds that the proposed variance would not alter the essential character or be injurious to the enjoyment of other properties in the area. I noted the 6-foot fence that runs between the nearest adjacent residential property. That 6-foot fence would buffer a significant amount of the noise. There's not a huge difference in impact when we're looking at those uses at 3.2 feet or 3.6 feet compared to the 5 feet as required by code. Next slide, please. Here are photos of the variance requests. We see the hot tub in the upper right. The upper left shows the gazebo and patio area. Just some detailed shots on the bottom screen. Next slide, please. With that, staff recommends denial of this variance request to the interior side yard setback. The staff report does just list that one variance, variance A. Worth mentioning is if the board is able to make variance findings for some or all of these, you would be able to approve some or not all. You would be able to pick 1 or 2 or all 3. It wouldn't just be a yes or a no to all 3. So if you guys have questions, I'll be here. The applicant is also present.
Thanks for that presentation, Mr. Liska. Are there any questions of staff? I see none. So let's open the public hearing, and we We have Ms. Now on the line. If you could press *6 to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Heidi Now. Thank you for having me.
Yep, if you want to give testimony, you can.
Yes, so further to Andrew's findings of A, B, and C and the separate variances, we are willing to move the hot tub and move the gazebo to the extent we realize that that could affect our neighbors, even though, less than 3 feet, I don't think it really affects the neighborhood in terms of noise or anything like that. But really what I'm most concerned with is that the patio itself, which is, barely off the ground, and we have a French drain and a pit underneath for drainage issues. And I think that, if we're forced to cut off some of the patio, it's really going to, mess with the aesthetics of it. The concrete is color stained. That's why you have to do it all at once so it all matches. We've done a lot of work to the property and really raised its value for not only us, but for the neighborhood. So I would respectfully request that we be allowed to leave the patio as is.
So, Ms. Now, in talking to Mr. Liska, you probably know that there are 3 findings that we have to find to legally grant a variance. And one of them is practical difficulties, and it can't be solely for an economic reason. So can you help us out a little with your testimony on what practical difficulties or what uniqueness about the property requires you to have the patio where it is and how it is?
Well, really the practical difficulty there is that we have installed the French drain with the drainage pit to make sure that water is obviously going away from the house. So there was that, and the backyard was really uneven, and we had to grade the soil and do all of that. And then also, because we did lay down concrete for the sidewalk area as well, if you look at the photos, if we have to move the patio, we would probably have to redo the entire back meandering walk as well. So I understand that it's not just economic difficulties, but we would probably essentially have to redo the whole thing. And like I said, we're fine moving the hot tub and the gazebo. We can do that. That's not going to be a huge issue. I mean, we will have some issues with removing electrics and doing that, but it's really the patio that we're most concerned about.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions of Ms. Now? I guess not. Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the queue that would like to speak for or against this application? If you could press *6 on your phone and give your name and address for the record. I'm hearing none, so I'll close the public hearing. Board comment. Mr. Johannesson?
Thanks, Chair Perry. I don't know. I look at this and it's unfortunate it's been built. It's unfortunate even more that it's conflicting with the ordinance. But when I look at the neighborhood, I look at the amount of noise that's in the neighborhood, moving a hot tub, 2 or 3 feet to make it less, I guess, I don't know, less noisy for the neighbor or the neighborhood, seems kind of trivial to me. Again, I'm not happy that things were built against the ordinance, but I don't see how, being less than a block off Lake Street, that the noise from their house and the noise from the neighbor's house, I mean, if you look at these houses, they're very close together. almost all of them have fences. It doesn't seem to me, in my opinion, that it's a big deal. And so I'm leaning towards the applicant, but I would like to hear from my fellow board members.
Thanks for those comments. Anyone else like to speak to the land use request? Mr. Hutchins.
Thank you, Chair Perry. I appreciate what Mr. Johansson said. The only thing is I don't like the precedent that it sets that you can build something without looking into the zoning and then immediately we just grant it because it's already built. I don't like that. We don't do it with houses. Now we're going to do it with hot tubs. I don't like that precedent it sets. The one thing I'd be interested if people are interested in voting separately on these issues, maybe lumping the hot tub and the patio, since the applicant is okay with those, maybe lumping those into one vote and separating the patio discussion for another vote, if that's interest to the board. Thank you.
I will say that I have not yet heard, staff may differ with me on this, but I haven't heard findings that we have to find for granting a variance for the patio or the other items. So while I appreciate your comment, Mr. Hutchins, on setting a precedent of people doing something, then coming back and granting it, I think we need to, the key is we need to have findings, and staff is saying that we haven't found for finding number one for any of them.
Okay.
Mr. Softly.
Thank you, Chair Perry. I was actually going to iterate the point. I think that we do have findings that it's a reasonable use. I would certainly vote for that aspect of the project, but I'm still searching for what the practical difficulty is. So if anyone else can help me get there, I'm on board to approve, but right now I just can't.
Anyone else? So if there's no further comment, I would entertain a motion from someone. Mr. Hutchins.
I'd go ahead and make thank you, Chair Perry. I'd go ahead and make a motion to deny the variance and go with staff's findings for A, B, and C.
Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Johannesson is seconding.
I'll second that.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Smakarova, do you want to second or do you want to make a comment?
I just wanted to second, but I don't have to. Mr. Johannesson beat me to the punch.
Okay. Okay, there's no further discussion. Will the clerk please call the roll on the motion, which is to deny all three?
Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Sandberg.
Aye.
Moffley.
Aye.
Pinkarova.
Aye.
Wang.
Aye.
That's 7 yeas.
So the requests are denied. Ms. Now, you can talk to Mr. Liska about what your options are going forward. Let's move on to agenda item number 8, which is 1324 Quincy Street Northeast. And Mr. Liska, you're up again.
Thank you, Chair. If IT could bring up the presentation for 8. Thank you. This land use application before you is located at 1324 Quincy Street Northeast, involving Los Campañones Gym. Los Campañones Gym operates out of the 13,000 square foot former warehouse facility. A 9,000 square foot courtyard exists to the north of the site. The site is zoned I1 and is in the Industrial Living Overlay District. Within that 9,000 square foot courtyard on the north side of this site, there's a solar array. A concrete wall exists to the rear along the alley. The gym building wall to the south, an adjacent building wall and structure to the north, and a 6-foot fence along Quincy Street to the front. This site, again, like I said, is zoned I1 and is in the Industrial Living Overlay District. If we look to the east there, we see that darker gray. That darker gray is I2 zoning, medium industrial. And if we look to the west, we see residential properties off of Monroe Street. That is R2B zoning. Next slide, please. Los Campañones Gym is proposing to utilize the courtyard space underneath the solar array for outdoor classes. This proposal is in violation of the enclosed building requirement, Ordinance 550-80. That ordinance reads, all production, processing, storage, sales, display, and other business activity in the industrial districts shall be conducted completely enclosed within a completely enclosed building. Below is the site plan, demonstrates where the solar array is in that courtyard. Some distances provided there from the rear, not quite 30 feet. The rear there, kind of on the north side of that site plan, would be towards those residential structures. Next slide, please. The variance, again, to the enclosed building requirements. And when we are evaluating these, we are looking for 3 findings. First finding involving practical difficulties. With COVID-19 and the restrictions associated with gyms, staff recognizes challenges in maintaining a business like this. With that said, all gyms in the city face this same requirement. There are always the enclosed building standards associated for these uses. This is not specific to 1324 Quincy Street Northeast. This is across the board applicable to all gyms. This site is zoned industrial. There is a large wall to the rear along that shared boundary with that residential zoning that may offset some of those impacts. But again, this regulation is for all gyms. So nothing specific or unique to this property. The second variance finding looks at whether this is being used in a reasonable manner. The proposed variance is a reasonable use of the property, especially in a pandemic. However, the intent of the code is to minimize off-site impacts associated with those outdoor uses, specifically the noise generated by this use and how that may affect adjacent uses. The ordinance and comprehensive plan call for this area to be production mixed use. This is industrially zoned. There are noisier uses associated with this use. But again, it is not keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The last variance finding we are looking at is regarding the essential character. The proposed variance would not alter the essential character of the area, although it is injurious to the enjoyment of other properties in the area. Again, the industrial zoning has louder uses than some. The city got involved with this application due to zoning complaints made by neighbors nearby. So we do know that the use outside is negatively impacting people. We have received a significant number of correspondence regarding this application. Neighbors both supporting this request and hoping it is denied. So I guess that maybe depends on your threshold to listening to some of this noise, or perhaps your proximity. Next slide, please. On the top upper left, we are looking at the building associated with the gym, Los Campañones. On the upper right, we are looking at the adjacent structure to the north. When we drop down, that lower left is the concrete wall that exists along the rear of the property. And the lower right is the fence existing between the courtyard and Quincy Street Northeast. Next slide, please. With that, staff recommends denial of this variance request to the enclosed building requirements. I'll be here for questions. The applicant is also present.
Thanks for that presentation, Mr. Liska. Are there any questions of staff? Mr. Softly.
Thank you, Chair Perry. Mr. Liska, I have a real quick question about the larger term, long-term impact of a variance. If granted, would it be something that a future property owner would be able to utilize for additional uses that are not limited to outdoor gyms or workout facilities?
It is my understanding that the variance request for outdoor or to around the enclosed building would be applicable to other uses. If the board was amenable to granting this variance, I would suggest maybe adding a condition that limits the use if that is of concern.
Thank you, Mr. Liska.
Any other questions of staff? Yes, Ms. Smirkarova.
In light of, I think one of the things you mentioned about it being COVID times and this is not specific to this gym, that all gyms have the same requirement. Is there any special licensing or variance or limited access sort of conditional anything that the city has prepared for these specific COVID uses? I'm just curious if there's any answer to the COVID crisis that has come out into these sort of policies or regulations. Because I know some things have been adjusted for COVID, so I just didn't know if anything else had been adjusted for COVID.
Yeah, we have a lot of flexibility, especially regarding restaurants, a few other uses. We've got some additional flexibility in temporary use permits. That flexibility does not extend to gyms. So we are kind of tied there.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for staff? I see none. Let's open the public hearing, and we'll start off with the applicant, Mr. Benjamin Lohr. If you could press *6. I'm sorry if I got your last name wrong.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll start off. By
Could you
saying
give
I
could you give your address for the record, please?
Yep, my name is Benjamin Lair, and I'm calling from 1324 Quincy Street Northeast, Minneapolis.
Thanks. Thank you.
So I purchased the property in June of 2019. It was already an existing fitness center. It was called Uppercut Boxing, and it had been there for quite a few years. And I specifically had interest in the property because it was already a fitness center, and it was already having a courtyard that was being used for fitness. And when I purchased the property, I was under the presumption that that was allowed and approved, and I could continue doing what was already being done. And so when I took over the property, I did a significant investment in making it, there was no fire exits, so I made fire exits. There was no wheelchair accessibility, so I made ADA a compliant space. The fence was, the front fence, well, the Quincy fence was destroyed, so I made a new fence. I redid the concrete because it was a tripping hazard, and I also placed the large solar canopy in that space to power my facility and to provide shade for people out there exercising, because it was, bad sunburns were happening the first year, and it was going well. And then as soon as I got noise complaint, we canceled all music out there. We put signs up, and the staff patrolled regularly to ensure that there was no music being played, because I did not want to have a negative effect on the neighborhood. And then I also put down a very large piece of turf, as in like AstroTurf, and that was to soften the area so it wasn't all concrete. So a lot of the activities were taking place on the turf instead of the concrete, to also make it quieter. And so now I am seeking variance to be able to continue to use the space because of the significant advancements.
Okay, thank you for that testimony. If you've been listening to the previous requests, you'll know that we have these three legal findings, and one of them is practical difficulty, and I appreciate all the things that you have done to make things quieter and to try to address the noise, but that's not really the motivation of the law. Is that to not disturb neighbors with outdoor noise, but
yes,
the variance itself that you're asking for is to have a workout space outdoors. So what's the practical difficulty that you have that requires you to do that?
At this location, the practical difficulty is that without the outdoor space, I am not confident that that location will be a viable business for me. Because, like I said, I was under the presumption that it was allowed. And so without the outdoor space, and especially with COVID, I'm not confident that business will continue to, be there without it.
Okay.
And I will add one more thing. So
sure.
when I initially applied for the solar array and the new concrete, on the plans that I submitted to the city, it clearly showed outdoor workout space labeled on that plan that the city approved. So that also made me confident that it was allowed before I started all the work.
I see.
So it's not like I was trying to hide it or anything like that. I was pretty as clear as I could be in my plans.
Okay. Are there any other questions of the applicant? I'm seeing none. Let's move on to the next person in queue. It's Mr. Bob Bailey. If you could give your name and address for the record, and please press *6 to unmute yourself. I'm getting notification that Mr. Bailey may not be online. So Mr. Jack Nelson Pallmeyer, if you could give your name and address for the record and *6 to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, Jack Nelson Pallmeyer, and my address is actually 2021 28th Avenue South in Minneapolis, which is nearby another location. But I wanted to share some of my concerns about the outdoor space of Los Campeones, and just 4 very quick comments. The first one is the outdoor space is almost always noisy, and it can start very, very early in the morning. My second comment is that people working outside or working outside, they're noisy. They yell encouragement. They celebrate their achievements. They beat tires with mallets. They drop barbells. They grunt. They moan. And those are just kind of go with the territory. The third complaint that I would have is that in our area, other noises that could be mitigated often are not done so. For example, there is often music that is coming from the building itself out onto that space. And even more problematic is there are sometimes they got rid of the parking lot or part of their parking lot in order to create this outdoor space. So you have at times cars parked either in the parking lot or on the street right outside, blasting music from the cars. And sometimes when I call, they will do something about that, but oftentimes I have heard or they have said they can't do anything about that because it's not, if it's a car that is right next to where they're working out but isn't in the parking lot, then they can't regulate that. So my final comment, and the one that I have found the most disturbing, is that counter to what we heard, at least around here, it's really spotty in terms of self-regulation. So I would say over the years, I've called dozens of times, including sometimes several times a day, to complain about noise. Depending upon who is at the desk, sometimes that my concern will be addressed. Many times it won't. Sometimes it will be addressed, and then an hour later, I'll have to call again. So those are the concerns I have. This facility that I'm talking about is on Franklin Avenue and 28th Avenue. But my experience with the outdoor facility is it has, in some ways, come at the expense of the peacefulness of our neighborhood.
Thanks for your testimony. Next, we have Mr. Andy Meyer. And if you could press *6 to unmute yourself and give your address for the record, that would be appreciated.
Yep, I'm on. This is Andy Meyer from 1325 Monroe Street Northeast.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Please,
Thank you so much for oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, please proceed.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me on. So I love following that last commentary because it is a spot on example of what we're experiencing in Northeast. I believe it was August of 2019. That is when the solar array began to get put up and the outdoor noise started, and things got completely different than the previous owner's Uppercut Gym. When I think about uppercut, I think about quiet, respectful, jump rope, running, nothing wrong with that. When I think about the new gym, I think about people yelling swear words, fights breaking out or hearing fights close to starting, cheering, yelling, clanking of weights. It's worse than having construction behind your house. So just to give you an idea of the proximity, I'm in the bottom left picture on page 9. My house is the one that you can see about 10 feet away from that retaining wall that does nothing to quiet things. I mean, it literally is like there's no wall there. I would echo the sentiment that the 7 to 7 hours are not accurate. There's people there 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Not every day, obviously, but sometimes it goes late into the night. The music outside being off, simply not true. It's definitely on, and the open windows of the main gym you can hear as well. I feel terrible that COVID is going on and that the gym is experiencing difficulties, but I do think that they had the intent of this outdoor workspace well before August of well before COVID started. And then the last thing, I just want to echo back to what you all were saying earlier with the hot tub hearing and the precedent that it sets. If you let somebody build something and then use that as an excuse to allow it, it sets a really bad precedent. And this is a business, not houses. So I would just lastly add that there are 5 kids under the age of 4 within the 5 houses behind the gym. So that swearing, yelling, and fighting is heard by a bunch of kids. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for your testimony. And next we have Nick Herdlicka. Again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name. If you could press *6 and give your name and address for the record.
Hello?
Yes.
Am I on?
We can hear you.
Hi, my name's Nick Herdlicka. I live at 1317 Monroe Street, Northeast. My property borders the gym to the west. Since they took over the property at 1324 Quincy, summer of 2019, you know, they've basically been using that outdoor workout area since day one. And basically before that, it seemed to be more of a parking lot, really. If you look on Google Maps, I provided some pictures. I don't know if you guys have those or not, but you can see that it's a parking lot, you know, and they just said, oh, we're going to turn it into an outdoor workout space. It's been really disruptive to the neighboring properties. I really like hearing from other people that are in my neighborhood and even other neighborhoods that have dealt with the same stuff. It's insane. And it's so loud, you can't even open your windows anymore. If you can imagine outdoor classes going on at 6 a.m., you know, on a Saturday morning or Wednesday morning or whatever, and clanking weights and all that kind of stuff, it's pretty terrible. You can't even really enjoy your backyard at all. Also, the gym has been in violation due to noise pollution 3 times through the city since they've moved in. And as recently as February 11th of this year. The owner claims the 25% maximum occupant capacity issued by the governor hinders their ability to serve their clientele. Yet their website, if you go to their website right now, it states that 25% is their conventional operating capacity. So it seems to me like he's using COVID as part of his excuse for trying to get this variance, which I think seems a little ridiculous. Another thing, I had a video. I don't know if you guys can play that or not. Do you guys have the ability to play the video with the link I provided?
That information was shared by the clerk to all of the board members, so they have been able to look at that.
So they have, okay.
Yep.
So, you know, in the current owner of the gym, he previously stated that, oh, we don't use, oh yeah, the city told us not to use music anymore outside, so we stopped that. Well, it never stopped. And you can even hear that in the video if you listen, on top of the ridiculous yelling and clanking of weights. You can hear music in the background. So I think the owner says one thing and does another. And that's the way it's been since day one, since he moved in. But yeah, it seems like any of the neighbors that border the property have issues with it. Anyone who's been in support of it have been basically, you know, business owners down the street, or maybe there have been neighbors, but they live further down the block. They don't have to hear the noise. So, but yeah, so based on those facts, you know, it shouldn't be allowed to operate outdoors. And I think it's as simple as that. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, thanks for your testimony.
Right,
is there anyone else who would like to speak? If you're online, press *6 to unmute yourself and give your name and address. I'm hearing no one, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Board comment? Mr. Johannesson, and then, I'm sorry, Mr. Sandberg, and then Mr. Johannesson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Perry. Everything I've heard tonight, I think, supports staff findings. If I recall the ordinance properly, I believe there are some outdoor uses that are allowed, like landscape materials and so forth, in that kind of an industrial business. But from what I've heard here tonight, it's appropriate that outdoor exercise is not one of those permitted outdoor business activities. So beyond that, I'd like to hear from other board members.
Thanks for those comments. Mr. Johannesson.
Well, thanks, Chair Perry. I agree with Board Member Sandberg.
Thank you for that comment. Anyone else like to comment? If there are no further comments, I'd entertain a motion. Mr. Johannesson?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve staff findings.
Okay, there is a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that. This is Sandberg.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Sandberg.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Karova.
Aye.
Aye. That's 7 yeas.
Okay, that motion passes, so the variance request is denied. And you can see staff after Mr. Lair. You can see staff after, or talk to staff after this meeting, or whenever you have an opportunity. I would suggest soon, since there are time factors involved, about what your options are moving forward. And so that staff person would be Mr. Liska. With that, we've completed all of our items on the agenda for this meeting. I'll ask if there are any other matters to come before this board. Hearing none, without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Our next meeting will be March 4th, 2021. Thank you, everyone.